traditional
over to Sandy's house up there.
Yeah.
pre-multiple meeting era. So what time is Faith Forum? I guess I should
In the
read.
summer?
It's 8:15, yeah,
It's the same
Yeah, I'd say
Oh, you mean
10:15, yeah, after the
in the
service.
summer, yeah.
in the summer, after the
So you get a choice between coffee hour or.
And that's why I said we should have coffee hour at 8
What did we do
o'clock.
last year? I forget.
That's probably what we're basing it on, is whatever we did last year, so
The boss should be in short.
Hey, Gary,
Yeah,
so with the summer schedule, what did we do last year with coffee and with Faith Forum? Do you remember when they occurred? I can't remember.
I was talking to some, I know it was probably to Karen, because she's arranging for somebody who's coming and doing a demonstration, and I said, probably we'll do Faith Forum 10:20 to 11. That would give some,
Oh,
what?
sorry. Do it at 8:15?
Well, then when you choose between coffee hour or Faith Forum?
Well, I mean, a lot of times,
We'll get more
in the
people.
past, we've had that short window, it's just when we moved to this. And, so the service will probably be, an hour, we got
15.
20.
Don't fret,
Might be
it will
that.
have
Choose a
more
short
people.
Eucharistic prayer. Not this prayer,
Summer homily. Rub-a-dub-dub, thank God for the grub.
I think it's at 9, the service. Starting, no, I mean, during the year.
Starting.
Yeah, for those of you who go early. Yeah. I just,
Yeah, if that doesn't work, we can push it
do you mind?
to
I'm
10:30.
gonna put this here.
10:30 to 11:15.
So y'all just couldn't get through those pillars, huh?
No?
We just have too much to share.
I know. I actually watched the video.
No, that's what you just said.
I know, but.
I didn't
That's
get
fine.
mine.
But you didn't bring it.
No, I didn't. But you
We did the
know
first
about
4.
books if you want to.
So I can do 5 and 6 to catch us up.
Yeah.
As quickly as possible. Shall we get started?
Sure.
Okay. All right, so welcome back, Nadine, friends. We're going to continue our Pillars of Joy. Last time we transitioned from the obstacles of joy to the pillars of joy. I think it was a much more positive conversation. And we're going to pick up where we left off, which is the 5th pillar of joy, forgiveness, freeing ourselves from the past. And for the context of our first question, if you want to turn to page 233, the Dalai Lama says, forgiveness does not mean we forget. We should remember the negative thing, but because there is a possibility to develop hatred, we mustn't allow ourselves to be led in that direction. We choose forgiveness. So in a way, this is counter of the old Western idiom phrase of, forgive and forget, right? So what do you think of that?
You don't forget.
We do what?
You don't have to forget.
You don't have to forget.
You can forgive them,
Mm-hmm.
just don't let them do it again.
Love them from a distance.
Hmm.
I always love that.
Yeah.
You can forgive them, and then you have to love them from a distance.
What do you mean by that?
Just the kind of like, I have a brother that is a problem, and I can love him, but I can't be together. It's from a distance.
Yes, this comes up every Thanksgiving, I think. Especially the last 5
Well, an
years.
ex-husband.
Oh.
But I mean, if you do, have that heaviness in your heart and hatred, and you don't forgive them, you're the one that's losing, in my opinion.
Mhm.
You need to forgive and not forget and love from a distance.
Well, and this also goes into the Dalai Lama's whole thing about there's a lesson that you learn from everything. And someone does something wrong, there's a lesson you learn from that. Not only how not to do something for yourself, but how to protect yourself perhaps from the evil that might be done towards you.
Mhm,
And if you can forgive, but you don't want to forget and lose those lessons.
mhm. Yeah, we learn from our experiences, and to the extent to which someone has fooled us or betrayed us, there's that, what is it, Scottish phrase, fool me once, shame on me, fool me twice, shame on you.
Yeah, I was about to say the same thing, yeah, exactly.
I still struggle with, really, what does it, what does it mean to forgive? Because you don't forget. Is it that we're not hating? We're not dwelling on all the awful feelings that we can have towards that person or
Hmm,
whatever society? Is it where our emotions are?
mhm.
But if you carry that around, I think it hurts you more than the other person.
The mothers in the chapters I found amazing, I guess is the word, because yes, they felt the pain and the hurt and they expressed it. But then minutes later, they turned around and my child, I love you, which was profound.
There's she was up in here, I can't remember. There's that old phrase that refusing to forgive somebody is drinking poison and hoping that the other person dies.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that it's what is internalized, what's in your attachment, I guess.
That's a good word.
Your attachment to
That's a
that.
good word.
You don't have to give them a place in your heart or in your head.
Yeah.
Because if I let that person ruin my life because I'm just so
Uptight about it.
I mean, what good does that do to hold on to all this toxic pain?
And that kind of goes back, I think, to the Dalai Lama talking about us making ourselves miserable.
Yeah, he says you should remember the negative thing, but because there is a possibility of developing hatred, as you say, we mustn't allow ourselves to be led in the direction. Choose forgiveness for our own sake.
So it takes time too, just if you have that hatred or you've been hurt, it just doesn't go away overnight. To give yourself time.
Well, it's easy with our kids because we always love them. I mean, we can get upset with our kids and say, I disapprove of what you did, but you always love them. I think it's a different situation with somebody outside the family.
Yeah, let's go into that. So do you struggle, when do you struggle with the act of forgiveness?
And they keep repeating it, I think,
Well, I struggle a little bit if I forgive somebody, but they don't want to talk. And it's obvious they're not forgiving in any way.
They're not repentant.
I'm sorry.
They're not repentant.
Right.
right.
I don't know, does forgiveness depend on the other person repenting?
No.
No.
But it's easier.
You'd be in trouble if it did.
Yeah.
It would be easier if.
But
It would be easier if they
Yeah,
met you in the middle.
that's where the struggle is if they don't repent.
Yeah.
It seems as if in their mind they did nothing wrong. Or they didn't do any harm to
Most people are really hard to forgive.
you.
We take back control, page 235, we take back control of our own fate in our feelings. We become our own liberator.
And a really prime example of that, I think, in our own time, is the South Carolina church shooting. The young man who went into a church program and killed a number of people, family members, and that whole, the family members of the group all went to court and forgave him.
Yeah,
very
that was very
publicly.
moving, yeah.
And I'm not sure I could have done that,
Yeah.
at least not that quickly.
The alternative is holding a grudge. What does that do? Does that hurt the person who hurt you more than it hurts yourself.
I think holding a grudge and forgiving are different things, though. Accepting what is one thing, forgiving is another.
Mhm.
How so?
I think you just have to hold a grudge against someone to not necessarily forgive them for something they've done. They did it, and it's done, and it's past. That doesn't mean you hold a grudge against them. But it does not necessarily mean that you're going to forgive them and say, okay, come do it to me again.
Oh, well, yeah, so forgiveness really isn't saying, you know, come at me and here I am to be a punching bag.
Yeah.
But holding the grudge,
That's very nuanced.
that's what,
It is nuanced, but I feel like there's a difference between
Yeah. I'm
accepting
I get it.
what is and forgiving
Mhm.
what has happened.
well, I could give an example from my family, but I won't burden you with that. My family has lots of examples.
I can feel your pain. And so Douglas Adams here says, do you agree that the power of forgiveness lies in not losing sight of the humanity of the person, whole responding to the wrong with clarity and firmness? What would you make of the elements so critical to that process? The power of forgiveness lies in not losing sight of the humanity of the person.
In other words, we're all human and we all err.
Oh.
Some mistakes are just bigger than others.
And also Jim's comment earlier about repentance. Do you still forgive if they don't repent? You do, but that's difficult.
I think the issue, again, nuanced of erring versus intentional action.
I'm sorry.
We
I'm thinking of, I just watched the Celtics, and if you're watching the NBA playoffs, there's a big debate, discussion going on with new rules, and there's fouls. So is that a flagrant foul? A flagrant 1, flagrant 2? I mean, nobody knows the difference, you know, even the officials can't tell. Yeah. So, I mean, to your point,
Incidental accidental.
that is the error just a mistake?
Yeah.
A foul?
And
Or is it flagrant where it's intentional?
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. I think an error can be either an omission, an overlook, or just an accident,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to something you set out to do.
I still think we're called, that's still part of humanity. I still think we're called to love those people. Intentional or not, as hard as it is or not. I have one particular example that is always my example of, if I can love this particular individual, that would be wonderful. But
does it mean to wish them goodwill? To not wish them ill? I mean.
yeah,
Yeah.
it does, but, you know, for me, it ties into all of this, so I even use it in context of this discussion about humanity erring and doing things intentionally, and who is it to judge so much intentionality when it comes to humanity? People react out of their own personal experiences and how their lives were formed and all of that good stuff. And so, you know, I'm not saying that people can't, I definitely think people can change, but many, many times they don't. They're still part of humanity. I still have to try to love those people.
Is it easier if they're not in your life, but they're somewhere?
Yeah.
Love at a distance.
Yeah, very much so. If this person was in a room with me, I'd have to leave. Yes.
But isn't that valid? I mean.
Yeah, I think so.
Back in decades, and I'm trying to remember if it was the 70s or the 80s, Bishop somebody from Africa, and I don't know how to pronounce his name, Avenger or something like that, wrote a book called I Love Idi Amin.
Oh,
And it changed my whole perspective of loving everybody. That's fine. I can love a criminal. I can love a serial killer. I can love him. I don't have to accept him, what he does. But I can love the part that God made. And separating the part that God made from his decisions to do wrong helped me so much to be able to say, yes, I can love you.
Very good.
I totally agree with that, and that's what it comes down to for me, is knowing that that's a human being, and as a human being, I can love this individual, in spite of those horrible things.
where does that love of the,
From God.
And feeling compassion.
is it a feeling or
It's a decision.
it's not necessarily, you might not feel warm feelings.
No warm feelings here.
It's seeing the humanity.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, seeing the, I guess if I was to choose an emotion, it would be gratitude.
Yeah.
For
What was that, Mark?
humanity. Gratitude, for the gratitude of humanity.
Sometimes the humanity is really hidden deep.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's messed up.
Mhm.
Well, yeah.
World War II.
Putin.
Yeah.
On the very edge of this, but one of the things that really hit me is when our son passed away, the cards that came in. I mean, it
It
was.
blew our heads.
Yeah, it just, I mean, it changed my view on how important that is to a family or to a person.
I have another example. We took a class, and it was, I'm trying to remember what the name of the church, Cherry Hills Community Church, and I can't remember the speaker, but it was a Friday evening and an all-day Saturday, and the title of the class was Love is a Decision, and it was aimed at husbands and wives who are having difficulty, but we took it anyway. And there again, back to your love thing. Love is a decision. It's not an emotion. That's why I can choose what I love. I love everything and everybody. It is a decision. It's not my heart. I'm not in love. You know, that thing that you feel when you first met that guy or that gal. To continue on, it has to be a decision.
So it's a little bit like, okay, I'm gonna bring my mother up.
Yeah.
You're making it close now instead of having it far away.
In my opinion, she wasn't a mother that I would have chosen, but I've gone to California to see her because it just seems to be the right thing to do. And I can't put my finger on it because it's not fun. I mean, it's not enjoyable. But it just seems like
You love her in spite of what has happened. Maybe.
yeah, love, because it's not a warm feeling.
No.
It's something else.
But you raised a wonderful person.
Pardon?
But you raised a wonderful daughter.
Oh, well,
So there was something positive.
there was
Yeah.
something positive.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think that's where I see her humanity and I see where she came from.
You know, that sounds a whole lot like my father, but
Yeah.
what I've learned over the years is how he was brought up, and there was no love in his family.
Yeah.
So he didn't know how to do that because he had never seen it.
Yeah.
And,
So that's where the humanity comes in.
yeah,
And we can act on that. No, we're not gonna go visit Putin.
I'd like to send Putin this book, though.
He'd send it right back.
I think if everybody in the United States sent him a copy of the book, maybe he might.
Well, I'm sure it's printed in Russian.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
But see, my father could never say he loved me, but he could go buy me a car. And in that way, he was saying it because that's how he knew to say, I love you. You know, I had to learn that.
And he loved me. He really did. I couldn't, because I think I talked to him.
Yeah, he loved her more than he loved me.
No, not really.
Smothers Brothers.
I think if you've not been immersed in it early in your life, love can be a very scary emotion, very
Yeah,
frightening
yeah.
emotion. It makes you want to say, makes people want to say,
Mhm.
I don't want to get that close.
Yeah.
I think
Well,
that may
you
be
have
a
to.
reason- that may be a reason why some people who may want to change, someone who sometimes can, talk about doing things and maybe continue to do the wrong thing over and over.
Mm.
That may be part of why, because they're just afraid, that whole fear of getting too close. And love is a part of that, I think.
And behind that fear, love requires one to be open to being hurt.
To be vulnerable, right? People who have been hurt are afraid to be
Yeah.
vulnerable again.
To trust without a guarantee that it's all going to
Yeah,
So I think that's why it's so important, and perhaps even part of the message of this book. The more people that read this book, like you talk about sending it to Putin, change him, but the more people that read this book, perhaps it will change more of us, putting more people into the world who are coming from a place more of compassion and love, and not being a reinforcer of the behaviors that cause people to be afraid of love. So by having love for other people, we are giving them an example, right? And they might feel safer.
I want to complicate this.
Oh,
I don't, but I'm thinking about this sort of mini industry that Christian psychologist Gary Chapman, I don't want to say foisted, but gave to all of us about these love languages, right? There are 5 love languages, they argued. There's giving gifts, that's buying a car from Jim. There's physical touch, there's acts of service, quality time, and words of affection. And so when we're talking about love here, but what is that? You know, greater love has no one than this, that they lay down their life for another person. That's different than saying, I love you. You know, that's actually doing something, you know. And so I think that's why I say I don't want to complicate it, but I'm struggling to get this conversation about love, get my hands around that, given what Chapman has pointed out, which I think in many respects is true. You know, I grew up in a household where, at least with my mom, the love language was acts of service. She just did things for everybody. She was a great hostess, and all of those kinds of things. And so that's that's kind of how I expect to give and receive love, is I'm going to do something for you, and you're going to do something for me. My wife is a quality time person. She wants attention, right? And she's happy to give me attention. I want her to clean something. You know, and so we've had to figure out how to translate our different languages to one another. But in this conversation about how are we going to get Putin to love anybody, what does that mean? Does that mean that he's going to call up somebody and say, I love you? Or does that mean he's going to have people stand down? I mean, what does that mean? I don't know. So I'm struggling about that.
I totally agree with, well, I love the love languages, and I think on an individual basis, one-on-one basis with people that are immediately in our lives, they're very, very helpful. And I wish we all grew up knowing that, because it would make a huge difference. It doesn't seem at all the same. So I don't really, I don't know, I don't think people couldn't have any love in their heart.
Well,
I don't think that language, I don't think it matters what language.
I think they have love. They have tremendous love, but it's for themselves.
For
I think all
themselves. Good
autocrats
point.
are narcissistic.
Good point, yeah.
Whether it's, one of our past
Power.
presidents, or whether it's Erdogan, or what, all these, they're all very similar, in that they love
Yeah.
themselves. And
And so it
And that
doesn't
doesn't fit
matter
into
what,
Jack.
right, no, it doesn't matter what the love language is, because all they want is their needs met, whatever that is, that power or whatever, and they're willing to sacrifice, probably willing to sacrifice all relationships.
And unfortunately, in our current society, one of those whole areas has been taken out, which is physical touch. A fist bump is not the same.
It's not. Well,
And I love that we hug so often in the peace, because it is a encompassing kind of love that you don't get with a handshake or a, it's more of a, it's opening yourself to accept whatever the other person is, has to give, needs, or whatever.
But I would say, I think, at least in my experience, coming out of this isolation, and I'm a hugger, but what came out of it for me is recognizing much more clearly that not everybody is.
No.
You know, and so hugging or being that close, while it's great for some of us, is threatening to other people.
Other, yeah.
Now, I think, like I say, I'm much more aware of that, so that, and I think people who aren't huggers necessarily weren't as comfortable not hugging prior to COVID. Yeah. Because if everybody's hugging, they might feel some pressure to do that as well. And now they don't.
Yeah.
So much. I'll take the fist bump.
And it's something that we tend to inculcate on our children. You've got to let Uncle Joe give you a hug. Well, the fact that Uncle Joe's kind of a sleazy old man is, okay? I know, I've always said to my grandkids, no, they don't have to hug him. No, they don't have to hug you if they don't want to. That's their body, their choice. And giving that choice to children early makes them open, leaves them open to giving those hugs when they're ready, and to rejecting them when they have a feeling that it's not the time or the place. I used to often, we had bereavements at the hospital, often families would come in, and often I would just reach out like this and see what happened. And how many times I had families just come into my arms. But you couldn't approach them and hug, but you give them an
Invitation.
give them an invitation.
For me, I mean, I know a lot of people love Zoom, and it was better than not having Zoom, but I like to have physical presence.
Yes.
Is pretty important to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on.
Moving on.
Next one. So on page 242, for the context of gratitude, Douglas Adams writes, gratitude, page 242, gratitude is the recognition of all that holds us in the web of life and all that has made it possible to have the life that we have and the moment that we are experiencing. So have you been able to acknowledge moments of this nature of gratitude in your past? Holding us in the web of life.
That's beautifully stated.
It's good, right?
I always find it easier to reflect back and have gratitude than at the moment to have gratitude.
But we love our house, we love our family.
Right.
No, I think gratitude is a daily thing. I mean, walking outside first thing in the morning and smelling the fresh air and the beautiful land that we live in, the community we live in, the friends that we have. I mean, it is so easy for me now. I'm an introvert. I'm an extreme introvert, guys. Terrified of doing things. But boy, I'm sure grateful for it all.
In the moment. Now, Jim, when you said that you find it easier to reflect, do you mean like later on?
Yeah, I think we go through a lot of things, and for example, when we go through tough times, You think you're
Okay.
isolated by yourself.
Sure.
But when, 10 years later, you look back and you realize God was there.
Mhm.
And you just, at that moment, you were so, what was going on was so, I think, isolating to you that you didn't look for God or see God and what was going on. And I think, to me, I've looked back and I thought, man, when I changed careers, a guy called me up who went to this church and said, let's have lunch. And we had lunch, and it sparked a 12-year career for me. But at the time, I thought, I didn't even think about it. But now you look back on it, and you go, for some reason, that person knew to call me.
It's so great to hear both of you speak, because Bev talks about gratitude in the moment, and I talk about reflection, and they're both just different forms of gratitude.
Right? It's an interesting combination because I'm the extreme extrovert. Really? Yeah, real surprise.
He's got a black and blue mark here, Berman, holding on to him.
I think gratitude can be a good way to kind of get out of yourself or away from yourself when you appreciate and give thanks for whether it's just being surrounded by nature or being surrounded by caring type of people, and I think gratitude probably is a helper or a building block of compassion.
And while it's difficult in the moment, it's often useful at the toughest times to look for the gratitude. When things are really going badly, what can you find in this situation is good?
Does it have to be in the situation? Maybe
Sometimes it's all that teaches
maybe
you
the
through that
sun
situation.
is shining.
And that's,
And you're in a situation, and so you look for something
and the sun is shining.
in this. Well, I am thankful the sun is shining,
Exactly.
but I'm not thankful for the situation.
You don't have to be thankful for the fact that your dishwasher just dumped water all over the floor of the kitchen. The
Right.
sun is still shining.
But the sun is shining, or all the flowers didn't get destroyed by the hail.
Exactly.
Well, I'm not thankful for that hail, but all the flowers were destroyed. For me, they didn't all get destroyed, but to me, it's just a natural, maybe Dalai Lama can do it. I'm thankful for the dishwasher flooding the main floor, but I don't have that maturity to do
I
that.
was thinking of the men's group yesterday. 20 men there, and any of us could have thought of doing this, but Whitney Hill was the only one who thought about calling Chip, and picking him up and bringing him over. And that had to lift, his spirit, because he fell and really injured himself bad, and, he's still walking around with a walker. But obviously, it was something that Whitney was thinking beyond himself. Hey, what can I do to do something for somebody? Gratitude.
Yeah, that's
I
the
think
example
that's
of
what you were
gratitude
mentioning.
after the fact.
Uh-huh.
Because that afternoon, I thought about that. Yeah, I didn't think about it in the moment when I was sitting next to Chip.
Yeah.
But I could see how ebullient he was, how happy he was just to be around people again. And then I thought about it later on that, Whit really did a gift there.
What do you think inspired Whit to do that?
That's what he does.
That's what he does.
But yeah, I know.
Yeah,
But what do you
that's
think?
inside him, we don't know.
Was it compassion? Was it love for humanity? Was it
Could be all of that,
He was
'cause that's
able
just
to
who he
be
is.
there at the meeting.
I mean, he was always looking out for somebody who just couldn't do it. I have another story. Friday, we went to high school graduation at DU, it was Smoky Hill, and they had 11 valedictorians, and every one of them spoke, maybe for a minute or two, throughout the ceremony. And every one of them expressed how terrified they were going to this new school for them. And 4 years and going through COVID, the pandemic, and coming out, and here they are, graduating at the top of their class, and how grateful they were, how they learned their community, they built their community. They felt in the first day of freshman that they were alone, and by the end of their senior year, they had their community, and they all, every one of them expressed their gratitude. It
It
was
gives me hope for
beautiful.
the future.
I know, it was beautiful. I don't know if they were told that was supposed to be the theme of their speech or what. But to have 11 valedictorians, they must have all had the same GPA, is that why? I don't know. They were amazing.
I thought it was kind of cool, they had 11 versus 1, yeah, it was a community.
Message.
What was, I just lost his name.
Boozy.
No, it just went into Meister Eckhart,
Oh, yes.
who said that if the only prayer you pray is thank you, you've prayed enough. If the only prayer you pray is thank you, then you have prayed enough. Or words to that effect. Because one of the things I think that gratitude does is it decenters you. You're the recipient, you are not the actor. So
It gets you out of yourself.
yeah. You are the beneficiary, you're not the be-all and end-all of everything. That recognition takes you off of your own pedestal.
There's a great little quote in this book to that point from the Catholic Benedictine monk, David Steinberg Rast. And I love the parallel structure here. It says, it is not happiness that makes us grateful. It is gratefulness that makes us happy.
Yeah, it's true.
I have struggled with gratefulness for much of my life because gratefulness was imposed on me. You know, my parents went through the Depression, and so, you know, I was a child of the 50s, and life was good. And my mother would often say, you should be grateful, you should be grateful, you should be grateful. Well, I mean, that was my world I lived in. It was the 50s. I didn't grow up in the Depression. And so I had to learn to experience gratefulness because it was inside me, not that it was imposed that. So, you know, like, well, you need to be grateful so that you can be happy and joyful and compassionate. So it can't be used as, well, you need to do this so that you can be this compassionate person, which is the way you have to be. It needs to, for me anyway, it needs to come from within. So if I can look at the sun is shining, that gives me joy as opposed to, well, you should be grateful. I know your dishwasher is flooded, but you should be grateful. That doesn't work.
Yeah, it's always rubbed me the wrong way. Because it says to me that I don't have a right to be sad about anything, or I don't have a right to be upset. Yeah, it's invalid.
Invalidates, yeah.
Diana Butler Bass wrote a book, I think it was called Gratitude, but what you said reminded me of, I think, how she started a chapter, and you kind of hit it on the head. I think it's something that has been ingrained in this generation. But she talks about, goes into an elaborate, beautiful story about a gift and that she received, the tangible physical gift that she received, and how she, you know, she was required, I think we were, maybe all were required to write a thank you note for stuff. And that's that forcing that gratitude, so that now, my son doesn't. I mean, he had to, we forced him to do it, but does that take away our ability then to be able to identify really what gratitude is for a while until we mature to a point where we can go, I don't feel grateful, or I give the gift back, or, whatever. Well, that was the mean mom response to everything was, did you appreciate that check you got for Auntie Lisa? Because if you didn't, then, and you don't want to write a note, I think you should send it back. Told you I'm a mean mom. So now we get a text, thank you.
Well, maybe, did you enjoy the gift? Yeah. So why don't you let them know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I didn't
Because
do
they'd
everything.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
But if you didn't enjoy the gift,
Send it back.
Yeah,
As an only child, I had a unique bringing up. But one thing my mother did, and I never even thought much about it, but at the end of the day, I'd go to bed, and she'd come in and sit on my bed and say, how'd your day go? And you know what? That gave me the feeling I was important. And that carried me through a good part of my life, but I didn't even realize it at the time. My mom, it was like my mom, I'm gonna give you this time, and you're my total focus. And it was easier to do because I was an only child. But I mean, that built up my ego that Bev's still trying to bring down. Yeah.
But he did pass that on because when they were in primary grades, he would sit upstairs in the bed with the two kids and they would talk, whatever. I stayed out of it because it was his time. Yeah, he needs to be earthbound. That's part of acceptance. Remember that acceptance last week?
the kids might not be grateful.
They're
at the
not.
time, Because
They're not.
it's,
No
it's the environment they live in. I mean, it's like the air we breathe, except when it's smoky, then we notice that the air we breathe when it's clear is really,
Yeah.
I'm thankful. But see, they're not gonna know to be grateful until.
Thomas was, which is interesting. He would call us,
when he was young.
4 times, our son, he would call us 2 or 3, sometimes 4 times a week, just to say hi. I mean, he's in Cheyenne. Our daughter in Aurora, we probably talk once a month, maybe.
She was a handful.
Still is. Well, I mean, when they're 8 years old,
Yeah, I
they're not
understand.
gonna go, oh gee, thanks Dad for sitting on my bed.
Yeah.
They might not think about.
No, but those kind of things, you have to, they're a tape that is recorded and you find the benefit of it years later.
Yeah, later.
Well, what we're brought up with, whatever that may be, is what's normal to us. And someone else's way of life is not normal to us. So that's what is internalized, what, as a child, you live with, is what's internalized as being what is normal and right, and how things should be. And whether that's good or whether that's bad, that's what you've internalized. And you carry it into your adult life. And then attempt, really in an unconscious way, as much as anything else, to impose that as being what should be normal for everybody else, because it's normal for you. I think one of the things I worked really hard with, because we were in the military, we had so many different cultures that we would interact with, and making sure that the kids understood that this family was that family, who, maybe that family was vegetarian, maybe that family was Muslim, maybe that family, whatever, that their way was normal for them. And so we had their house rules. But in somebody's house, their rules are what goes. Don't do things you wouldn't do at your own house, but don't do anything that they're not allowed to do. That's their normal, and that's what's right for them. And if you're in their house, then you live by what their rules are.
I always remember one of the funniest things that ever happened to me in this church. One day I decided to share with the men's group what was going on with my daughter. And after high school, she decided she didn't need college. she went out on the streets of Denver.
She didn't need us.
Yeah, and the next thing, she was dancing at Shotgun Willie's. And I shared that with the whole group, and at the end of it, a guy came up to me and he said, of all the men in this church, you would be the last person I would think that would have a daughter that is dancing at Shotgun Willie's. And I'm thinking, now do I say thank you or do I start crying? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, since it's getting close
Yeah, we need to.
time, I don't, but this has been a great conversation, and I hate to rush us along, but there are some things at the very end that I would like to be able for us to reflect on. So I'm not probably going to go through all of those questions, because our conversations tend to, include all of the thoughts that are in those questions, I think.
Yeah, we actually talked about some of the other pillars.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there is a quote that kind of frames the beginning of the compassion pillar, but there's another, well, that is on your sheet, but there's another quote that sort of, I think, may help us understand what these two feel compassion is. Almost a definition. And this is actually from a quote from a book. Compassion is a sense of concern that arises when we are confronted with another's suffering and feel motivated to see that suffering relieved. Compassion is what connects the feeling of empathy to acts of kindness, generosity, and other expressions of altruistic tendencies. That's actually, literally, that's kind of textbook from research in it. But anyway, it's on page 252. Again, for me, it was really, it was helpful to take a word like this that we find difficulty putting words to, and sort of give it a definition. So but the first the first quote under compassion for today is, it probably takes many years of monastic practice to equal the spiritual growth generated by one sleepless night with a sick child. If you're a parent, do you find this idea to ring true? In what ways? And if you're not a parent, have you had similar experiences with a person or animal that you love dearly? But most importantly, what was it? I think right off the bat, I remembered early at the mother, or I believed, reflected on the fact that I'm loving our child so much, this must be what God's love is like. To feel that nothing this little person could ever do wrong. Silly me, I was naive and somewhat younger than now. But I do believe that, because, in ministry, I work with people like in an AIDS ministry where, people were dying of AIDS and their families had abandoned them. They couldn't love them through that. And so reflecting on that and reflecting on this love that I felt. Yeah.
I think that's maybe that whole idea of they can't do wrong has been allowed to be perpetuated to the point that parents sometimes think that their kids really, as teenagers or as young, you can't do wrong, and then don't discipline and don't provide them the guidance that they need. I think perhaps that's part of what we see sometimes in our surroundings and behaviors of others, not just kids any longer, who've grown up being in that atmosphere where you can do no wrong. You get in trouble in school, we'll defend you. Not, if you're in trouble in school, you're in trouble at home.
That reminds me of in the news, the letter the mother wrote that said, burn this when you finish reading it.
Yeah.
about how she loved him and she'd help him bury the body and,
Yeah,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, a little bit of.
Mythology there.
So how did you grow spiritually, or can you think of a time when you grew spiritually simply out of your love and recognizing, wow, I love this person or this animal more than I realized?
One of my takeaways from the Old Testament is how often God made covenant with the Jews, and then the Jews broke the covenant. And I think it was 7 times, or correct me if I'm wrong. And so for years and years, I thought, God's not a perfect person because we're a perfect entity, because this happens again and again. When I had children, then I began to understand it.
Yes.
I went, yeah, I'm still willing to forgive you. We're going to.
But there will be consequences.
Yes, there will be consequences.
One of the things that I learned really early on, when I started college and I was taking a class in Old Testament, was that covenant is not a contract. Covenant is a one-way sort of deal that God covenants with Israel. Mm-hmm. It's not you sit down and you come to this agreement. God says, this is what I'm going to do for you. Mm-hmm. And so the faithfulness of God to the covenant is part of that attribute of who God is that's so different than what we are. We will make a contract and talk about, well, you've broken the terms of the contract, so now I don't have to keep mine.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
But this is a covenant that I chose you, I covenanted with you to be this for you. Mm-hmm. And if I don't live up to that, then I am not who I said I was.
Not a quid pro quo.
Right.
So like love by example then.
Yes.
Because it's not
Yes.
transactional. It's
Right.
not that I'm going to love you if you do this.
Right, and what Israel realizes over and over again is how far they fail.
Yeah.
It's reflected in all those writers.
I think the toughest one for me was, we had dogs and we raised them from puppies, and when you raise a dog from a puppy, you almost have unconditional love. But from the Dumb Frenzy, we got a girl that was 10 years old, and you knew she had been abused because she wouldn't come on your lap, and she was really standoffish. And at the end, I'll never forget this. She was struggling because she had cancer, and when we took her in and decided to put her down, she just wanted to lay in my arms. And she was almost saying to me, I trust you now. Whatever you do, I trust you. And after they gave her the morphine, I just lost it. And the lady came in and said, would you like me to take her? And she said, no, why don't you stay there for another few minutes? And it was, but separating myself a little bit from that, when I did alpha classes in Faith Alive, I always remember, they'd have a 24-hour prayer vigil the night before, and I'd always come into that prayer vigil before I went to the weekend. I'd say, God, whatever reason I'm here, I'm open to whatever you want me to do. And I never went on a weekend where I wasn't praying for people that I never knew before the weekend, and yet they were completely open to me. And what I learned through that is I couldn't heal them, but I could be God's vessel to work through me to at least, give them comfort. And I think that's when I really learned compassion for people. Of course, I always say, well, if you can do it on the weekend, why can't you do it all the time?
So that's a really good segue into, unless somebody else would like to share a story, to me, it leads into very nicely into self-compassion and self-acceptance We have a question, how does our lack of self-compassion manifest in 259? Self-compassion is closely connected to self-acceptance, which we discussed in earlier chapter about actually having compassion for our human frailties and recognizing that we are vulnerable and limited like all people. That's at the bottom of 259. Have you ever thought about whether you, this is not on your sheet, about having self-compassion, and what that means and what that looks like? Or is this a new term? It's fairly new in a lot of discussion circles. Self-compassion. You ever thought of having self-compassion? Yeah. Do you feel what was that? Yeah.
I think that, I wonder whether or not we think about it or we turn it around, because sometimes we'll say, well, I'm really being too hard on myself, which is the opposite of self-compassion. And I think we hear that critique, oh, you're being too hard on yourself, which is really an invitation, but we don't hear about it in that direction, we hear about it from the other side.
I've been told, no, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh yeah, don't be so hard on my friend. That's what somebody said to me. So I was the friend. And she was saying to me, don't be so hard on my friend. And it was like, yeah, it puts me outside of
yourself.
And as though I'm somebody else who's treating me really poorly. And that was very significant. And I believe self-compassion is when we learn to respect ourselves, take care of ourselves, not in a narcissistic way, but then we realize that not necessarily being so great to other people either. Because slowly, gradually aware of the consequences of not being good to my friend. So it's a growing awareness of how then it spreads out to other people.
We're not really raised or inclined towards self-compassion because it's so often confused with selfishness.
Yeah, Puritan ethic.
Yeah,
And
that's
it's
the way our
that's a
generation is
very,
raised.
it's a very interlocking, what is selfish, what is self-compassion? Do I really need this mental health day, or do I just want to take a day off and be lazy? And for lazy, for example.
Keep talking.
Okay.
Some days we need to be lazy because we're so tired.
Well, how about it, in Ray, the word lazy is such a judgmental word.
Exactly.
When, maybe we should just consider using the word rest.
Yeah.
I need to rest. And we're the ones who work 60-hour weeks to get, everything had to get done and more. We pushed and pushed and pushed, and then we feel guilty oftentimes for resting when we're fully entitled to that rest.
But then people say, well, if your bucket's empty, you can't give to others. So I guess we just need to be aware, am I being selfish, or am I taking care of myself so I have more to give to myself and to others?
I think it's difficult when you have a family,
Oh, well.
and there's no time to even get finished what you need to do with the family, or if you work or whatever, cook dinner, do laundry and all that. It's like, where's self-care come in?
Well, you don't do Easter dinner.
I know some people do that, but I felt like I was selfish if I did that. Like, well, well, I'm gonna go have a massage, work it out amongst
Well,
yourselves.
the laundry will get done, yeah, it'll be there when you get back,
Yeah.
right?
But, with kids and their homework, it just goes on, and I just felt like there was no time to take for me.
So who put the pressure on you to do that? And if you think about it, perhaps there are voices in your head, not like in schizophrenia, but voices, other voices from your life that are telling you those things, right? Oh, you can't stop until you get this done. You can't, you have to do this. A good mother
Yeah.
would do that.
Now that they're all raised, yeah, it's just like, and now that I'm older, I can take time for myself, and I figured it out. That I just can only do so much. But I couldn't then.
In our family, we had a love bucket. It was a conceptual, it wasn't an actual bucket, but it was a conceptual love bucket. So was having a bad day, you must have a hole in your love bucket. Let's patch it, and let's all fill it back up. And every so often, the kids would call me and say, Mom, you've got a hole in your love bucket. And so it would come at me in the same way. It was a way of caring for each other. But it was in a concept that was an external concept in terms of love. There's a bucket. It's full of love, it's got a hole in it, the love's all leaking out the bottom end. So let's patch it up and then fill it back up again.
Same concept, you gotta love yourself before you can love other people.
Absolutely. Well, and they say in here, lack of self-compassion manifests in a harsh and judgmental relationship with ourselves. And many people believe that unless they are critical and demanding, they will be failures, unworthy of recognition and undeserving love. But people tend to project that out into the world and treat other people the way they're treating themselves. Sorry, page 260.
You wanna give us, you're not gonna give us your comments at the end.
What, so this has kind of been, churning over the past couple of weeks in my mind. Is there some way to continue the conversation for a little while at least, perhaps on Zoom? Not only the conversation, but maybe if you're interested in developing some of these practices, they're in the, there are things we can do in the back of the book that are really helpful, some meditations and things. And so I'm just gonna put that out there for you all to think about. I have your email addresses. I can always reach out to you and see if you're interested and see when, if you want to do it, anyway, I'm just putting it out there.
Would it interfere if we met at the same time in this little room over there? Across the hall, it'd probably interfere with the
Yeah,
next.
because you don't wanna be competing and people have to make
I
a choice.
went to a church once where we had 5
5 groups.
groups going at the same
And
time.
Gary, he's very open to having parallel, because remember Mary Mead was doing the Bible study when we were doing it.
I'll
But I thought
ask
we're
her.
here for church, we could come early and meet, and anybody that, could be in the program that wanted to join us, but I almost think it's like a little therapy class.
I hadn't thought of that.
No, but it is, to be able to say things.
So Faith Forum during the summer will be after the service, after the 9 o'clock
Well, we could
service.
do that.
I'm just reminding.
Yeah, right.
So would you all be interested
Yeah.
maybe in doing that? You obviously
It
don't have to
sounds
be
more
here.
exciting than the songs.
Sounds wonderful.
If we're gonna spread this stuff, or if we're gonna start embodying the concepts here, which is their hope, then I think it would be helpful to have reinforcement and et cetera, so.
And that's the closing statements you would make in Mission Joy video.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Can I just mention one thing that really hit me while I was reading this?
Sure.
It was at the very end, when the Dalai Lama said, when he was passing away, I think at the time of my death, the word death hung in the air like a prophecy. I will remember you, meaning Desmond Tutu. That just hit me, And I think, when I die, I'm gonna do that.
One thing that hit me out of the whole book is the more supportive and the more you do with other people, the better you feel.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
It isn't giving to receive.
Yeah.
And that's not just in terms of giving, putting money in the plate.
Jim, you may not have
More so
ever, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to-
No, go ahead, sorry.
you may have not ever put that into words per se in your own mind, but I think that's what you do, right?
Yeah.
You think about other people and you serve other people all the time, and that's what brings you joy, apparently.
Mhm.
What would you say, Beverly?
Sure.
Yeah.
And I'm so, well, I,
Nothing to do with me, it's
no, no,
fine.
no, no.
You're an
I'm not
introvert, you don't
saying-
need that.
I'm not saying
No,
that
he
at
does,
all.
no, I agree with you. I just-
I mean,
What
I'm
she's
being
trying to
silly.
say is
I'm being
that
silly.
she was being worried about when I retired, and I was gonna say every morning, okay, what are we doing today?
Yeah. No, you don't say that.
actually, there have been times where I've thought, God, Beverly is like a saint. Because Jim is so busy doing these other things with the church, and
He hears about it.
good.
Don't kid yourself.
I'm glad.
I'm in my basement, very lonely. Hi, honey.
With your sewing machine, doing what you're doing.
With your puppy dog eyes.
Sewing for the
We have a
Salvation Army.
thing, and this developed because when our daughter, at the time husband, was living with us. But we kiss every time we leave. He goes, takes the dog for a walk, he comes and kisses me, I go someplace, we kiss. That is something totally new in our relationship, we've done it now for what, 15 years? That wasn't something we used to do at all, but we may not see you again.
I think that's a good thing. I think we say I love you or whatever.
Yeah, it's just one of the little things.
But just a little thing, yeah, and really think of it in those terms too. What if I miss the opportunity?
Right, and even walking the dog, I just, you could get hit by a car.
Mhm.
No. We gotta say it, because otherwise we'll feel bad. The last week that Thomas was alive, I had a conversation with him because he was out of the house. And I don't always say it, but I did say at that time, honey, I love you, have a good day, and I remember saying that specifically. Thank God I did.
Yeah.
Oh, he came back.
All he wants us to do is start church.
He wants
come to
his
get me.
assistant.
Yeah.
Church.